Right, well, we're here today at Edinburgh Fisheries and we're going to film an edition of Skills School all about method feeder fishing, or more to the point, method feeder fishing with pellets, which it's my preferred way of fishing a method, but we'll talk about a lot more of that later. Before I go into the actual setting up of method feeders and the little bits, little edges, if you like, that I feel that I use to catch me a few more fish on it, first thing I want to do is go through the bait, which is possibly the most important aspect of your fishing when using a method feeder. How your mix breaks down, how fish attack the mix and the way it behaves, that they're all very important in putting as many fish as you can in the net. So very quickly, I'm going to run through the basic preparing of the pellets and more importantly, the type of pellets that I use. I'm definitely not one that uses one single type of pellets from my method feeder, if allowed. Obviously, we can be a little bit restricted by fishery pellets, things like that, but at venues where anything goes, I think it's very important to have two different types of pellets that make my feeder break down in different ways, which is exactly what I'm going to show you now. So what I've actually got, I've got my normal plain Magnum 2mm coarse pellets. They're your normal coarse pellets that you're going to get at 90% of fisheries. What you find with coarse pellets is they break down very, very quickly, or not so much break down, the feeder breaks down very quickly. The pellets stay good, but the feeder breaks down very quickly, which is great if you're getting a bite straight away. If I'm waiting a lot longer for a bite though, then I want my feeder to remain as a feeder for a lot longer, so my bait isn't getting washed away by tow and things like that. And in that case, I need a different pellet, which in this case is a Coppens pellet, which helps to bind my feed a lot more. So by using the two different pellets, I can actually control the rate in which my feeder breaks down. So I'm going to show you now is how I prepare the two, and then I'm going to give you an example. We've got a nice little tank with us. We're going to show you how the feeders break down and how I can tweak my mix just a little bit to get it to break down 2 minutes slower, 5 minutes slower, depending on how my peg's behaving, how many fish I'm catching, and the conditions of the peg as well, which also has to be brought into consideration. But right, I'm going to do my pellets quick. So as I say, I've got my Coppens pellets here. I've got a couple of pints of Coppens pellets, and I'm going to open my plain coarse pellets as well. So I don't want loads. This must be the easiest thing in the world to prepare pellets. People make it nice and complicated, but there is no need to. I'm going to cover them in water. And literally, all I'm going to give both of them is probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on how warm it is. The warmer the day and the warmer the water that I'm putting on the pellets, the quicker they're going to start to break down and go soft. So in this case, still a bit, in fact, it's still flipping freezing. So I'm going to leave these probably 2 minutes I'm going to give them. What I want is a pellet that's nice and tacky. Yeah, they're not going to be ready as soon as I've had them 2 minutes. I'm going to have to drain them off. I'm going to show you in the way I drain them off as well. I think that's quite important to stop them where they are when I take them out of the water. And then they've got to probably settle for 25 minutes, and then you'll have lovely pellets that you can play about with and get the right consistency that you need. Right, and I've given these probably 2 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drain my pellets off. I'm going to stop them where they are now. I can just about make a ball with them. They're holding together, so they're quite tacky, but I say they've not gone soft yet. So I'm going to quickly drain my pellets off and get rid of them. And to make sure they're stopped where I want them, I'm going to grab my ball and I'm going to drain any more water out, really squeeze any more water out of them to stop them right at that point so they can't get any softer than they already are. Lovely, just mess them about a bit. So then my scratching one's done, my coarse pellets, and my next lot on my Coppens pellets, which take exactly the same amount of time, say 2 minutes. I'm going to drain them off and do it in one. Really get rid of all that water so there's no water left on my pellets. Same again, chuck them in, mess them about. I'd say a good 20 minutes now and they will be lovely. These will be nice and soft and these will be very, very sticky. So I'll be able to use the two and make a nice method feeder that binds really, really well. Right, now my pellets have had 15 to 20 minutes to soften up. What I'm ended up with is a lovely pellet. I can make a nice hard ball with. In both cases, I can make a nice ball to be fed. But it's easy to rough it up, so they're not sticking together too much. They're all nice individual pellets. They're perfect for making a method feeder. So what I've got now, I've got my tank, and I'm going to show you just the rate that the two different pellets, even though they've been prepared in exactly the same way, just the different ways in which they break down when made on a feeder. I've made a feeder in both cases, one with my coarse pellets and one with my Coppens pellets, and I'm going to introduce them into the tank and just show you how slowly one of them is going to break down and how quickly the other is going to break down. And by seeing at the rate that my feeder is becoming active in the peg, I can understand when I've got to cast again, when I've got to introduce more bait, when I've got to stiffen my feeder up because I'm not getting bites. So I can really think about how my feeder's working in the water depending on what's going on in my peg. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce these two feeders into the tank now. I say I've got my Coppens pellets, they're going to go in first. Lovely. And then my coarse pellets, they're going to go in next. Right, so you'll notice with the pellets, the coarse pellets have got a really fast breakdown rate, like I said they were going to have. They're almost, my bait's almost visible to the fish or accessible to the fish within seconds of that feeder landing on the bottom. That's if I was fishing that now, I'd have barely sunk my line and I'd have just started fishing and my feeder's fishing straight away. That would be great if I was throwing out and getting a bite instantly. Normally when you chuck into an island, catching a lot of small fish, things like that, that's the sort of feeder you want, the one that's broken down. The feeder on the right, however, in its current form, it's pretty much useless if I'm honest. I'd throw that, and because it's so hard, my hook bait would be inaccessible to the fish. No matter how hard they pecked at that, they wouldn't be able to get to the hook bait, and I wouldn't be able to catch a fish. So what I need though is a combination of the two, or the possible combination of the two. I may want to stiffen my mix up and slow it down. So by adding amounts of the Coppens pellets to the coarse pellets, I can actually control how quickly my mix is going to break down. Whether it's neat as they are, it's going to break down within a minute. I can add Coppens to it, different amounts of Coppens to it, and I can produce a feeder that breaks down within 5 minutes if I need to. So by having a little play about and having the two options, I can decide on how I need to feed my peg and how I need my bait to be breaking down and feeding the fish that are there available to catch. Right, now my pellets all sorted, my feeder bait all sorted if you like. The next thing I want to look at is the size and weights of feeder that I'm going to use. Obviously the first thing I'm going to look at is the size of feeder, and that's going to be controlled by how many fish I'm planning on catching and how much bait I want to introduce to my peg. So today it's still flipping freezing, to be fair, so the last thing I think is that they're going to be crawling on my feeder. So I'm going to use a nice small feeder. So I'm going to introduce a little pile of bait and I'm going to catch one fish at a time, and it's hopefully going to clear all my bait up so there's going to be nothing left. The next thing I've got to look at is the weight of my feeder. That's also going to be, I've got to look at with where I'm going to throw my feeder. That's going to have a big influence on it. Also the size of fish. So firstly, where I throw my feeder. So here I've got a nice open water section that's going to be nice and flat, and then also I've got an island over there to my right, which is going to have a nice steep slope up to it. So if I'm fishing onto a steep slope, then a heavy feeder's only going to be beneficial to me because it's going to land on that incline and it's going to stay there a lot better than say a 15 or 20 gram feeder is. So in this case we're going to use a 30 gram. If I was throwing in open water, however, I have to think about what's the bottom's made up on. If I'm throwing onto a hard stone, then it doesn't matter. But more than likely I'm going to be throwing onto silt, a soft bottom with it being open water. So a lighter feeder is going to be much more beneficial there. It's going to stay on the bottom and not sink into the silt. Plus, I can tighten up to it a little bit different, but I want to go into that later. The type of fish that I'm after, I say that's also going to impact the size of feeder that I want to use. I find that the smaller the fish, the lighter the feeder you need to use. When you're catching tiny little F1s, carp, even some skimmers, I find that by using a really light 15, even 10 gram feeder, you land a lot more fish because you haven't got the weight of that feeder bouncing. Incidentally, while we're on about feeders bouncing also, for my own fishing, for 90% of my fishing, I'd much rather use an inline version of a feeder. It tends to be what we have to use at most fisheries these days anyway. It has to be free running, but for me that's my personal choice anyway. I find that I can pull a little bit harder, I can get fishing a little bit quicker with less chance of them bumping off on the elasticated systems. The only time I'd use an elasticated system is if I was fishing for bream on a feeder, or I was fishing great big lakes like maybe Boddingtons and I'm casting a long way with really powerful kit, then a bit of elastic comes in handy. But in most normal commercial situations like this, for me, a running line feeder, it's far outweighs an elasticated feeder. So that's my choice for today. Right, so once I've chosen hopefully the correct feeder that I think is going to be best for the day, next I'm going to just check all my kits, the right sort of kit. The last thing I want to be doing is using big beefy kit when it's not required for the situation, for the peg that you've drawn. So what I've got today, I've got a nice little reel, nice little 3000 reel, a lovely little 10-foot, really soft rod, because I'm going to be catching small fish. And I've got a nice light feeder to begin with. So I was going to start with a 30 gram, but I've decided with it being a little bit colder, I'm going to start with it's flat on the bottom. And the fish that I'm going to catch are small F1s, probably £1 to £2, with some skimmers and the outside chance of a carp as well. So I've chosen for a 20 gram feeder instead, a little bit lighter, and there's going to be less chance of that feeder bouncing fish off when I'm bringing them in, as long as I play my fish correctly. I've got a fairly durable main line. I've got a £6 main line. A lighter main line is going to help me be able to cast nice and accurately. There's less chance of it pulling in the tow as well. I've got a bit of a nasty crosswind today, so if I had a really thick main line, it's going to pull my tip round. It's going to exaggerate it almost, pull my tip round too much and potentially move my feeder. So just by dropping down to a nice £6 main line today, there's less chance of my feeder being dislodged by my tip pulling round and the toe of the water. So I've whacked me, as I say, we started with a running feeder. That's all I'm going to use today. I've got a bead there to keep my hook length on. And what I do a little bit differently is I tie my hook length to the bead. It does limit me in that I can't swap hook lengths without destroying the hook length. But for me, by tying it to the bead, it just slightly increases the bolt effect. So when a fish actually comes against the, pulls against the weight of the feeder and the bead, it's directly onto the weight of that feeder instead of having to turn the loop over first before it does so. So by tying that, that's just a little tip just to help the fish hook themselves a bit better. And we've got a little tiny hook length there, a 3.5 inch hook length to an 18 hook of 0.15 mainline. That's about the lightest I'll go when I'm method feeder fishing. Because of the weight of that feeder bouncing on your line, anything lighter, you do tend to get a lot of breakages of your hook length. So about 0.15, which is probably 4 or 5 pound. That's about the lightest you want to go when fishing for anything on a method feeder, unless you're in real extreme circumstances, maybe some skimmers and things like that, but 0.15 for me is the way to go. And most of the time, I'd like to fish a banded pellet. If I'm feeding pellets, which we're going to do today, a pellet's the go-to bait for me. For small fish, it's nice and quick. You get a quick bite when it goes in. It's just the easiest bait to use. A nice pellet that doesn't break down too quickly, and I can catch multiple fish on it. So that's what we're going to go with today. Obviously, I've got a few other change baits. I've got some pop-up boilies, some white tuffets, a few little favourites of mine that I like to try. But in all honesty, 9 times out of 10, it's chuck in with a pellet, come back with a fish. I honestly don't believe that your hook bait is too important when you're catching too many fish. Hopefully I'm going to show you a little trick about that later, but we'll see how the day goes. Right, so now all my kit's ready, I'm ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is mix my pellets to how I believe it's going to start the session. I'm not expecting to catch fish instantly, but I do want to put a bit of bait down quite quickly so I can get fish feeding in my peg. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add probably 80% of the coarse pellets, the fast breakdown pellets to begin with, and I'm just going to add a small handful, so around a pint of them, of the sticky Coppens pellets. What that should do now, that'll create a feeder that's going to break down within 2 minutes. It's going to be nice and accessible, and I'm going to be fishing within 2 minutes, which I'm happy to wait 5 or 10 minutes just to begin with at this time of year for a fish to come into me peg. So that's how my pellets are going to be to begin with. Nextly is loading my feeder. It's vital that you load your feeder in the correct way. Making a mess of it is only going to result in fish taking your bait, spitting it out, and them not using the most of that bolt effect that you're trying to create and catching enough fish on it. So how I'm going to load my feeder, firstly, a little tip, this I must get asked about this 100 times every single week, is I put my mould in a bag. For me, it's so much easier, of however sticky my mix is, by putting my mould in my bag, I can load the feeder, give the bag a little pull, and it just pops the feeder straight out the bag. It's the tiniest, most simple little tip in the world, but it saves me a lot of time and a lot of stress, making sure my mix is correct for my mould. When that shouldn't be the way it is. I want my mix to be correct for the peg. It's up to me to get it out my mould in the best way. So what I'm going to do to begin with, I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of pellets in, just to cover my hook bait, and then I'm going to lay the hook bait in so that my hook length, the wind's being a bit of a problem, hook length comes out the base of the feeder. That's really, really, really important. Nextly, I'm going to put my pellets over the top of my bait and over my hook length, which is also important. And lastly, I'm going to encase them pellets in the feeder. Give them a nice little press, give them a good squeeze, and say by just pulling on that bag, I pop the feeder out. No matter how sticky those pellets are, my feeder's going to come out. But what you'll see is happen there, so my hook bait is just encased by the pellets on top. It's just underneath these pellets, but also my hook length is in there as well, which keeps it out the way of any fish, less chance of them pulling my hook bait out the feeder prematurely, and it just keeps everything nice out the way. By having my hook length in the bait, it also creates a little bit more of an added bolt effect, that when a fish pulls on that bait, it's got to pull out the pellets first, and then it's got the weight of the feeder. So it's just a little added boost, if you like, that's just going to make that hook go into the fish and make it hook itself, so I've not got to mess about. Finally, once I've got it out, I'm just going to give it one last press just to make sure it's nicely compressed. And then we're all good. We are ready to go to launch that into the peg, wherever I want to throw it on the day. Right, one of the last couple of points that I want to go through that's vital to get right when you're fishing a feeder is firstly to have my rod set up in the correct way when sat on my box. The worst thing I see, and I see it a lot, is people having the butt of the rod on the knee and the front of the rod on a rest when they're fishing a feeder. There's no way that you can fish efficiently and comfortably by having the rod on your knee, not unless you're getting a bite within 2 seconds of it going in every time. It's much better to have a nice stable backrest, same at the front, and my hands are nice and free to do whatever I want. I can feed with a catapult, I can make new feeders up, I can do whatever I want because my rod's there fishing, and more importantly, I'm not messing it about, I'm not moving with any vibrations. So it's fishing, it's sat in the stillest way it can possibly be. The second thing I want to talk about is the tension I put on my tip. This is another vital thing that I have to get right when I'm throwing a method feeder out. What I see a lot is people tightening up far too much in the wrong situations when they're throwing a feeder. It's by tightening up as much as you can, it's definitely the correct thing to do if you're fishing on a flat bottom, mostly in open water, that sort of thing. But if, as I am in today's, chucking to an island, the last thing I want to do is tighten my tip right round, which could potentially lead to a fish bumping into my line and dislodging my feeder too quickly. So I've got to almost sacrifice that slight bolt effect that I would achieve by bending it around a little bit more, and I just want a slight bend in the rod. Literally my line's just been picked up, so I can watch for any dropbacks and I can see anything going on. We've got a little bit of interest there already, which is good. But yeah, I want that slight bend so there's no chance a fish can actually bump into my line, and because I've got a fairly heavy feeder on, because I fished a 30 gram towards the island, it's not going to dislodge that feeder, so I'm going to remain fishing. If I tightened it right round and I hadn't used a heavy feeder, then it's going to very quickly move that feeder. You'll see what I was talking about before with the line as well. By using a nice thinner line, even with this nasty crosswind I've got going through now, here we go, we got one. It's not pulling my tip round too much. It's not affecting. It's not affected by the tow at all. And again, it's another factor that's not letting my feeder move because my line's not too thick for the day. Ooh, he's a bigger F1 now. I say, so the bites have come quite quick there. I've had 2 or 3 casts while I've been settling down, and straight away I'm starting to get indications. So once I feel that there's a number of fish into my peg, I'll start changing that mix a little bit. So that's taken probably 3 minutes for me to get a bite on that then. Oh, that was awful netting. Yeah, it's probably taken 3 minutes for me to get a bite. So once I start getting bites, or I start getting indications on my tip a lot quicker, then I can make my bait break down a little bit quicker and make that more accessible to the fish as soon as it's in the peg. Right, just as something a little bit controversial, I want to show you what's made my mind up that hook baits, in many situations, especially for catching F1s, when fishing a method feeder, your hook bait is almost irrelevant. Yeah, what I'm going to do to prove it now, I'm going to catch a fish without any hook bait on. I've got my hook with just a band on, and it's more of a case as long as my feed is loaded in the correct manner, then it doesn't matter, because I want the fish just to be agitated, pecking at that feeder, and they pick your hook bait up and hook by accident pretty much 90% of the time. So what I'm going to do, just as a bit of a test, I'm going to load my feeder up, I'm going to load the base up, I'm going to put that bare hook right in the middle of the feeder, so as I would if I were using a mould, just so you can see it a bit better. Just cover that hook bait up, or the hook up. And that is ready to go. This, I'll probably chuck it in a flipping tree now, but here we go. Wind's whizzing right around. As long as the fish are attacking that feeder, and I definitely find, I've tried this a few times, that as long as you're allowed to do it at the venue, as long as there's no rules against artificial baits and things like that, which technically I suppose this would be. A few F1 venues, I've had it where my tip's rattling all the time, and they can often find that they'll deliberately avoid your hook bait. If there's that one big 6mm pellet or whatever in the pile of micros, often it's a target that they can avoid once they've been caught on it a lot. So by doing this, it does definitely catch me an odd fish when everything's gone a little bit weird, and the fish generally towards the end of the year when they've seen everything on the method and they're a little bit wised up. Set that rod. Let's see. That's on. Officially, no hook bait required to catch them. So it amazes me where the hook does well. I'll almost guarantee that it'll be right in the middle of the bottom lip. Which shows as long as that feed is correctly and the fish has gone down, picked it up, it doesn't matter what I've got on the hook. Ooh. Oh, he's right in the, not in the middle, but he's just in the side of the bottom lip. So he's gone down and picked that up perfectly. A little sneaky tip. Right, well, hopefully that's just a few little tips to help you out with your method feeder fishing. As I say, this is basically just small commercial fishing for mixed species with pellets. There's a whole range of different things that we can do when fishing a method feeder. So we'll definitely do another one during the summer once it's a bit warmer, some proper carp on a different venue. But hopefully for the nice little intimate venues, there's a few little things there that help you along the way. Dude, didn't land in the water. I put a little one on and I swapped to a big one, and the big one's in the tree. The big one's in the tree. We best have a camera switched off.
I might have.
It's in the tree. What you need to do once you get it in the tree, the best way of retrieving your feeder is to put crash hat on and pull it towards someone else's swim. Where's he gone? Oh, he's in the water, we might get a fish.
Has he?
Oh, he's coming back, look.
Yeah!